Good morning. Welcome to 4media and welcome once more to our Friday Q&A live stream. Sorry we're a bit late. We've had one or two technical difficulties, but hopefully, fingers crossed, they're sorted now. So today is a very exciting day, and not just because we have another fantastic guest for you. This afternoon, the 4media team are all getting together for the first time in 4 months. That's in person, not on Teams or Zoom or Google Hangouts or whatever. We're actually meeting up and seeing each other face to face in the open air and socially distanced, of course. And because what you can and can't do is all a bit confusing, you'll be pleased to know that we sought advice at the highest level to make sure we're following the government guidelines. So we asked Michael Gove's office, and they said it's fine to go and buy your sandwiches from Pret a Manger, and there's no need at all to wear a mask. But Rishi Sunak's office said, pop into Pret if you want to, but you absolutely must wear a mask. Confusing, hey? So we went to the very top, and the advice from the PM's office at number 10 was, not sure about the masks, but just make sure you take precautions. So I'm not sure father of six Boris Johnson has a great record when it comes to taking precautions, but there. Whatever the rules really are, it'll be a good end to what's been a busy few days for us at 4media. We've had several broadcast days, launched what seems like dozens of surveys, and achieved some amazing coverage in print and online, including the splash in a national red top for one of our clients. On top of that, we've been producing film content and the odd podcast or several. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Alan Edwards. I'm the head of news at 4media. I'm also the former night editor of The Sun, with a lifetime in national newspapers under my belt. Between me and my team and Sam Dibley and his broadcast team, we've got pretty comprehensive insights into all sections of the media. We're here to help if we can. As you probably know, we've been holding these live streams for the past 17 weeks to try and provide a service for the strange times we've been living through. Our guests have come from national print and online, red tops and mid-market, national radio stations, national telly, lifestyle mags, digital publications, you name it. We plan to continue with these every fortnight, but we're looking at new ideas and exciting ways to expand and improve them. We'd love to have your thoughts on what you like about them, what you're not so keen on, and what direction you'd like to see them take in the future. Drop me a line. I'm on alan.edwards@4media-group.com, or contact any of the team at 4media. You'll see my email address there, but contact any of us here at 4media. And as always, if you need help or advice on anything at all, please get in touch with one of the team. Today, we're back on my home territory, national newspapers, with a talented young journalist who holds a pivotal role in the country's biggest selling newspaper, the Daily Mail. Most people in PR will have some contacts among the reporters, the correspondents, the people who run the news desks and the feature desks. But there is a faceless band of senior editors on every title who wield the real power when it comes to deciding what gets published, how big that coverage is, and what prominence it's given. In the main, you won't know who they are, you won't ring them or have an email conversation with them, and they certainly won't give you any feedback. So we're extremely lucky today that we have a chance to put questions to one of those big beasts, and a big beast he is, at 6'4" in his socks. Andy Ewart, despite the youthful looks, has been a top-level journalist since leaving Cambridge with a first, and has been a national newspaper executive for almost 10 years. He's also an author who's just recently published his first novel, Forget Me. And he's also the assistant editor of the Daily Mail and one of a small band of people who will decide if your PR campaign ever gets to appear in print. So I think you know the drill. Many people have sent questions in advance, which I'll put to Andy on your behalf. There's also a facility for you to tap in questions as we go. I'll do my best to get to as many as I can in the 30 minutes we have available. So now it gives me great pleasure to go over to the Daily Mail's Andy Ewart. Good morning, Andy. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Alan, and hopefully you're all hearing me here from leafy Hertfordshire. It does look more leafy than it actually is. This is just the background of my living room. So thank you for the introduction. Looking forward to your questions.
Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, and it's certainly looking very woody behind you. So first of all, first question I think we have is, the Mail now claims it's the biggest selling paper in the country. Well, I'm sure the Sun would have something to say about that. How's that come about after so many years? Why do you think that's happened?
I think there's a number of factors in terms of newspaper circulation. We can't deny that the readership based on online and just the changing demographics has altered. the Mail has always known exactly what its readership is, what they're into, and how we can bring it to them in the best way possible. And we have a very, very strong brand identity there, and a very, very loyal readership. And we've been catching up on The Sun for a number of years, and I don't think it was any surprise to anybody when we overtook them.
So, of course, interestingly, this has happened during lockdown, or during this crisis at least. How has the crisis impacted on the Mail and on your role there?
It's certainly been an interesting challenge. We could see the things changing when we started to see people coming back from ski trips, and this the rumours of something which was what we had really not experienced before. I mean, I remember the SARS outbreak and everything, and it didn't affect our country in quite such a dramatic way. We have all been working from home for 4 months. We have now started to sort of filter back into the office, but there is a significant portion of the workforce who are still doing remote access. And because of a lot of what we do is knocking around ideas, chatting through headlines, presentation, how important a story is, something that may seem very interesting at 10 a.m, at 8 p.m, it may seem, why did we even bother with that? So it's trying to sort of get the communication aspect of it, which is so key to national newspaper journalism, when we can sort of having to do it over, say, tools such as Slack and then more recently Zoom, so we can have a face-to-face ginwag about everything, trying to get a conference going, trying to get sort of ideas pushed between each other. And I mean, it's definitely been a challenge, but it's been quite successful in terms of it gives you more of a perspective of everyone currently is going through an unbelievable situation. And I think that's really informed our editorial line. We're trying to put ourselves in the minds of readers, such as my parents, who have been shielding themselves, being more vulnerable, and what they'll be interested in terms of content, how they'll be wanting, say, maybe a bit of light in the darkness, and trying to get a really balanced newspaper which isn't hundreds of pages of corona doom, and trying to sort of bring a little bit of joy back into their lives.
How would you say that the Mail has kind of approached this? Have you tried to be, I mean, obviously you have to report the news, but have you tried to be consciously upbeat rather than doom-mongering?
I think we've most definitely held the government to account on the mistakes they've made. We certainly didn't shy away from the Dominic Cummings lockdown Barnard Castle scenario. We know that this is a rapidly evolving situation which no one's ever experienced before, and we also know that mistakes have been made which we have to call to account. At this stage, the concern is we are getting advice from so many different sources and everything seems to contradict each other. Obviously we'd love to get back to a normal way of life, but we have to really maintain a balance and really scrutinise whether this is the right path, and what's the path for, say, a month's time, 6 months' time. And our readers want some level of security. They want to know that the people in charge have a plan, and I think that's what the questions that we're asking.
So, from the point of view of people watching this, in the PR world, the sort of coverage that you're looking to give, and the sort of stories you're looking for, would they tend to be away from the coronavirus field, something maybe a bit lighter?
We will love any stories that really take people out of this situation, especially people who've been locked down and able to see families, grandchildren. We had a great consumer story just a couple of weeks ago about the first paper wine bottle, which, great pictures, could do as a assistant night editor. I can do a great headline for that. I think the one that went through was Chateauneuf de Papier, which it's just to have a little bit of fun these days. I think everyone is looking for a bit of human interest stories and just a bit of intrigue, because a lot of people have more time to sit down, read a newspaper, and read it cover to cover. We're getting blasted with corona on every news bulletin. Everything you see on websites is corona, so it's nice to have something which just takes people out of that.
So if you're looking at, say, if PRs are looking to provide you with content, trying to grab your attention, how important is a celebrity quote, or maybe case studies? How important are they to you when you're considering what to use and what prominence to give it?
I think in terms of production, case studies are vital because it offers us a picture, and a story and a great news page hangs on a good picture. So we love that. You know, as a production journalist, we hate using stock pictures. That's the last resort. So a great case study is important. I think with celebrities, it's an interesting one because we always know about sort of branded content, about the Twitter and Instagrammers who that they will just be plugging something because they know they'll get some cash for it. If the celebrity has a genuine interest in it, and we can say that there's something in their own personal life which has made this important to them, whether it be a product or a story, then it's far more interesting. But I'm afraid to say that we see hundreds of very, very targeted celebrity-led adverts a day, and it's trying to whittle them down, and we can be extremely ruthless with that. We have no shortage of content these days. It's a struggle to get everything we want to into the newspaper because we have a finite number of pages which aren't based on, say, corona or politics. So it's got to really, really stand out if you're going down that angle.
So I suppose from that you would say that the content is everything. The strength of the story is the main driver of everything you put in. Other case studies and celebs may help, but it's all really dependent on the strength of that story.
Absolutely, 100%. We wouldn't use a story just because it, say, had celebrity backing. We might be a little bit more interested, but really every journalist, doesn't matter what level you're at, is interested in something they haven't seen before, and something which just makes you smile, something which you can say, oh, I can see everybody talking about that. The classic thing is, would they talk about it in the pub? Now, that's a little bit more difficult with social distancing. Would you talk about it on a Zoom meeting with your mates? It's to try and get that angle thing. Would I tell someone about this? Because people don't talk about adverts to each other. People talk about something unique and something different that they haven't heard of before.
Great. We're just picking up on that. We're already getting some questions coming in on YouTube. So the first from Christian, who says, your colleagues, inboxes, reporters' inboxes must be full with PRs trying to get their stories in the mail. What sort of ones cut through and grab your attention, and what can we do to make sure that our story or email stands out? So a little bit off your field, but how your colleagues would actually view that and then actually then get it past you to get it in the paper.
No, I mean, it's a really good question, because in some ways the first reporter you speak to will just be flicking, we'll get there in the morning and flick through 20 emails. And I think one key thing is to avoid the cliches. If you're saying everything is wonderful, if you're saying everything is relating to, say, a holiday that's coming up, say Halloween, and you're saying that it's spooky, that's going to sort of grind a reporter's gears because they've seen it all before. If you can come up with an interesting way of grabbing them within the first line, it's possible that they'll just, if you can't get something in the first line, they may not read down to the fifth paragraph. Unfortunately, because there is so much content coming through, and it's so easy with emails to just avoid looking at it, you've got to grab them immediately, and that goes with everything. If you're doing something that someone else has done, why would you do it again?
On a similar theme, so how do you think people like to receive these stories? I mean, traditional press releases, which are very client friendly but not always journalist friendly, or would you prefer to see a story that's actually almost ready to appear in a newspaper, written in newspaper style?
I think that comes down to resources. I think with a national paper such as the Mail, we have a tremendous staffing level, and we can really try and cut through that. I think any reporter will want to put their own stamp on a story, and so if you provide them with ready-made content, that sounds fantastic. I think the journalist's professional pride will prevent them from, however good your piece that's gone through, they will want to rewrite it and put their own spin on it and ask a few questions. I think on the industry has been squeezed at more of a regional level, and you may have more of a chance of getting through exactly what you want to say, but you have to be in some way bloody minded to become a journalist, and I think you will see through anything which comes across completely as a plug. I personally, from say when I used to do film reviews, I dealt with a lot of PRs who were all sending out something. So this is hilarious. This is action packed. This is wonderful, and you're seeing the same thing over and over again. I prefer some level of honesty, and I used to actually give a lot more column space to something which might be a bit more independent and quirky. That was just me. That was my own remit, and something which grabbed my attention because I hadn't seen it before.
So you touched on the Mail staffing. I mean, my impression would be that largely the Mail has kind of escaped a lot of these staffing cuts. That maybe, you know, the Guardian are now losing lots of journalists. Reach have lost journalists both nationally and locally. How are these cutbacks affecting the Mail, or not at all?
I mean, currently there has been no. It hasn't affected us. It's awful to see any other journalists lose their job. A lot of people would say the Mail and the Guardian are diametrically opposed in terms of their political standpoints, although sometimes they could be on the same page. Every story is taken with the editorial line that we take it from scratch. We will always support one aspect of the government, and I doubt the Guardian will criticise everything the Tories do. But you never want to see a fellow journalist lose their job. The Mail has been very successful, and it hasn't affected us in any way, but you never like to see anything in the industry go downhill, because these are all good people who are working extremely hard. It's just a very challenging market, and has been since, say, the internet started taking over, and it is hard to make people pay for content. There have been many attempts at it, some more successful than others. There have been some paywalls that have worked, some paywalls that haven't worked. The issue with the paywall is that you are then cutting off a huge level of readership who just will not want to pay for a certain story. It seems to be much more popular among, say, like financial-based papers or sports-based papers, where you can get original content. But anything, say, commercial, you've got to get people away from the idea that they think they can find this somewhere else online for free, because they will do. By and large, you will be able to find the story you're looking for away from a paywall. So it's been creative in finding a way outside that. I mean, we've recently put a lot of resources into Mail Plus, which has a lot of exclusive video content, because we believe our readership are quite interested in seeing, say, the actual faces of our columnists, their real lives. If you have a restaurant critic, you might wish to see them reviewing the restaurant in the restaurant, rather than just writing about it a couple of days afterwards. It's about being creative and find. The industry is never going to go back to the late 80s, early 90s of Alan's glory days. And we've just got to try and move forward with knowing that the internet is just going to continue growing and growing and growing. We have to link ever further with everyone consumes online. My great-grandmother consumes online. You can't pretend that there is just a paper readership and an online readership. Online has encompassed everything nowadays.
So that brings me nicely, actually, to the Mail, the paper, and Mail online. What's the difference?
I think that's a really, really interesting question, because the number of times when I've had a friend say, "Oh, I saw this on Mail online. Did you have anything to do with it?" And the answer invariably is no, nothing whatsoever. We have a very, very separate remit and readership between Mail Online and the Daily Mail newspaper. The Mail Online, as you can see from the sidebars, loves celebrity coverage, endlessly changing the banners, changing everything. We have a much more traditional way of presentation, and we have the people who we like to talk about, because we believe that's what our readership enjoys. We're not going to cover the Real Housewives of New Jersey or anything of that ilk in the Mail newspaper, because we believe our readers will say, "Who are these people? Why would I care?" I think that split has actually worked to our advantage, because we know exactly the people who click on the Mail online, and we know the people who buy our newspaper. And with certain stories, especially sensitive stories, embargoed stories, exclusives, we have conversations with online as to how they're going to present it, when they're going to present it, which is very key. But in terms of actual sort of cross-pollination, it's a lot less than you'd expect.
You talked about exclusives there. How important is an exclusive to the Mail?
we obviously love to be able to splash on something that no one else has. There is still, whatever people say about newspaper circulation, there is still a vast number of people who will pick up a paper from a petrol station stand because they haven't seen that story anywhere else. I think it's still key to driving sales, and it's a great feeling when you've got a great exclusive that is picked up by everybody else later on, but you've been first. In terms of, say, the inside exclusive, say, if a story is thrown away at the back of the book, page 30 or something, then you have to wonder how many people are going to see it. I think it's more of a sales driver and exclusive now. We're very keen on, say, not quite the vox pop, but finding out what our readership thinks. We do like a good political poll story, because it's not only interesting for us on how well people think the government has responded to the corona crisis, etc. It's also interesting, I think, for the reader to see whether they're in key with the wider populace, and to provoke debate. Really, I think a lot of what we do, whether you agree with it or not, should provoke debate and get people talking. That's we are just one of many media outlets. We have our perspective. Others may have a totally different perspective, and if we can start that conversation, it keeps everybody in the public eye.
Great. I'm going to whiz through. I'm getting quite a few questions in, so I'm going to try and whiz through some of them. So, what can we do if we do a research or a survey story? This one's from Hannah. What can we do to actually put a twist on that kind of story to make you sit up and take notice?
I think certainly if you're pitching to the Mail, look at the Mail's readership. Look at what sort of things you see in the paper. We're very keen on health stories. We're very keen on the sort of consumer stories that would be relevant to our reader. I mean, I mentioned earlier the paper wine bottle. Something on page 8 of the newspaper today had these blackberries which can survive frost, and that was clearly a PR-led story for Ribena and Lucozade. But it's also interesting to our readership because who doesn't like picking blackberries? It's a classic sort of Middle England. We're a mid-market newspaper. Think of the readership there, and think of, would this be relevant to them? If you're doing something that might be more relevant to the social media generation, that probably is less for us. And I think if you're sending out an email that will go to every single, say, consumer affairs editor on a national paper, you may have a very, very different response to who you send it to at the Daily Mail than if you send it to the Guardian. So I strongly suggest tailoring content to make it seem like this is something which will really get your readership interested, and everyone knows what the Mail readership should be. Read the paper, see what we're interested in, and then tailor it accordingly.
Right, you mentioned health there. So we've got a question here from Jodie Lewis from GCI Health. Is there any appetite to cover non-COVID healthcare stories, e.g. HIV or ovarian cancer, for example? Fairly specific there.
No, I think that's a fantastic story, and something which we have tried to flag up a number of times in terms of missed cancer appointments, in terms of this terrifying amount of treatment where people are either afraid to come into hospitals because they fear the virus, understandably, but also the fact that things have been cancelled and things have been pushed back. So we are actually really, really interested in those levels of health stories, because as life gets back to normal, there are so many people in this country who are living with long-term conditions, which may have really, they may feel that they're not going to get the care they need. So, I mean, I'm always interested in putting in the paper and giving a good show to a health story which isn't COVID related, because it's so relevant to our readership, and especially people who've been, say, isolating. They feel that there's no chance of them catching COVID, but they're concerned about something else. I think that's a great thing.
Another question here from Charlie Metcalf. When does new research become old? That's a really good question. When does new research become old?
It is a good question, and the amount of times when I've read a story and I thought, have I not heard this before? I'm sure I've read this research. It's sometimes difficult because it's a movable feast to find something a little bit new. And all I can suggest on that front is have a look back through cuttings, have a look back to see if something is new or different in this research, and is it just saying the same thing as been said before? Because the amount of times we see on a news list a story which seems to prove something we knew already, that story has far less of a chance of making it into the newspaper, because somebody, usually at the level of the backbench, which is my level, will say, I already knew this, even if it might be totally new research, but telling us something we already knew.
So another question here from Hannah Craig. What are your editorial deadlines, and what's the best time for your colleagues to receive a story?
Editorial deadlines, I think we should start with what's the best time to receive a story, because I'd say the earlier the better. From the production side of things, we don't like anything to come in late, because we have a late plot meeting at around between like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock p.m. And that's where, from then, the newspaper's in motion. It's going to be very, very hard to get anything in from beyond there. It will have to be an astonishing news story. A consumer story just doesn't have a chance. So if you want to get things rolling, you have to do it as early as possible. Our late deadlines are 9:30 for the first edition and midnight for the second edition. And certainly the second edition, it will have to be a very, very important news story to make it into the newspaper and get a good show. So if you, from a commercial PR perspective, consumer PR perspective, you'll need to get this in and get the reporter excited early on for them to pitch it, because otherwise I just don't think, with everything else that's going on, I just don't think there'll be a chance of it making it in.
And a follow-up question to that: what time do you actually sit down and have your editorial conferences during the day and actually make the decisions about the shape of the newspaper and roughly what's going to go in?
So there'll be a morning conference at roughly 11 a.m. and that's before the production heart really gets in. That's just an idea of what we're expecting, what's in the diary, and to have a sense of where things are going. And then by about 2 p.m, the night editor will be in and be starting to plot out themselves. By 3 p.m, there will be an editorial conference. So there will be, say, the news editor can then list, and there'll be a separate list for COVID, a separate list for any other big story of the day, and then a list for all the other stories. There'll be a foreign list and a picture list, and from then on, the plotting takes place, well, traditionally on the backbench, although increasingly it's been isolated. We're just moving back to that now. And from then on, the newspaper is in motion, the sub-editors are starting to file in, the copy has been filed. So if you want something to go in the paper, you have to catch it early. If it comes through at 3 o'clock and a reporter comes over to the news desk and says, well, this is interesting, I've got this, how many pages have been filled? I can't stress enough, you have to do this early, because everything moves so quickly, especially with the government briefings. We up page, we take more pages for, say, something which is particularly interesting to our readership, and things can fall out. A story which might have been projected quite dramatically at 4 p.m, by 8 p.m. may just be a little stick, which a very small story on the side of the page, or at the top, or fall out the paper entirely. We are very, very ruthless in terms of, if we don't think something has held up as well as we wanted to, then we will kick it out of the newspaper. We can do that. We have the authority to do that.
Good advice. I mean, just I'm conscious that we're well past 11 now. Just finally, how would you describe the male readership? You know, if the sort of people that the PRs are offering you content should be targeting through the mail.
I don't think there should be any surprises for the male readership. I think if you look through the newspaper and you see, say, today we had a large story about cruises. River cruises are back, which, as Alan, a cruise fanatic himself, will appreciate. That's a big part of our readership's lives. Look through also the adverts that we have in the newspaper, because that will tell you a lot about the readership there. You can really see the demographic from, advertisers are not going to pay a large amount of money for an ad in a paper where they don't think the people will be interested in it. So it is a mid-market newspaper. It is a Middle England newspaper. It's not that we might not stick an occasional story about Taylor Swift in, but we are very, very keen on things that appeal to purely our readership, because that we know them so well, and we hope we bring them the content that they want.
Andy, that's great. Look, we're going to call it a day there. Thank you so much for giving up your time to come and share such a great insight into the world of the Daily Mail. I found it fascinating. I'm sure all those watching have too. Just a reminder that Andy, as well as his day job, is also an author. I think he's working on his second book now, but you can still buy his current one, which is called Forget Me, at all good bookshops and on Amazon. I've read it. It gives a remarkable insight. Gives a remarkable insight into the brain of the author, but it's a cracking read. So thank you as well, everybody who's tuned in and asked questions. We really hope you found it useful. And remember, feel free to catch up with any of the team at 4media if there's anything we can help with, or if you have any views on the future of these live streams. We look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks from today. That's 10:30 a.m. on Friday, July the 31st. I'm now off to join with the rest of the 4media team. I just hope they don't get on my nerves after 4 months apart. In the meantime, as ever, look after yourselves. Bye-bye.